Recording in progress.
Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Daniel Velasquez Gaviria will defend the academic thesis, Non-Causal and Non-Invertible Models in Financial Econometrics, Theory and Applications. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis, please.
Dear Prorector, dear members of the Corona, family, friends, colleagues, and online viewers, in the next 15 minutes I will tell you a little bit how was my research in econometrics and the main conclusions that I have from these 4 chapters that I developed. So basically, I'm going to open up with some motivation, and after that I will share with you the main ideas about these 4 chapters. So basically, the main goal of this motivation is to understand how this mechanism of the speculative feedback and this bubble-like behavior that we see in asset prices actually is can be somehow fit by this new technology that we developed. Also, I'm going to motivate a little bit why these traditional models that we use in econometrics probably cannot adapt very well to this phenomenon. So basically what we see in financial prices, right, is this pattern. We see that in many markets, the prices are somehow rising, right, or going down more than expected, right? So at some point, even though there is no too much, let's say, motivation behind those big increases or big decreases in the price, right, we see a lot of volatility. That volatility somehow could be motivated by the future expectations. We define the price of an asset by the present value of the sum of the free cash flows, right? Bring it back to present value to a given interest rate. However, the models in econometrics that we use only consider past information. These expectations about the future are somehow not modeled in this traditional setup. So this self-fulfilling feedback always, let's say, can motivate these rapid increases in the price that we cannot explain, right? So the idea is to develop some new technology to actually account for that, right, and give more insights on what we see in markets. And a very clear example is, for instance, what we see in NVIDIA, for instance, from the last year and this year. We saw from January to middle April a very rapid increase in the price. That was basically motivated by some release of some better than expected free cash flows of the company, better sales. Somehow in April, with these new decisions of the Fed to have a more hawkish monetary policy, immediately the price decreases even more than it used to be the fair price. What is the fair price? There is another discussion, but we saw a very big decrease of the price. After that, we also saw a big increase, also motivated by the same thing. Results better than expected. Immediately, the price of the stock increased, which means that many investors bought the stock. After that, we had in the middle of June, in the summer of 2024, there was these restrictions of the exports to this GPU from NVIDIA to China, and then the price decreased, right, very rapidly. And what we saw is that if we use the standard econometrics models, we are not capable to fit that, right? But with this new technology that I'm trying to figure out, actually we do a better fit of this type of behavior. So basically, we work with these traditional autoregressive models, which basically we say that the variable depends on its past, right? But not only of its past, but also in, let's say, some uncertainty that comes from the past in the moving average probability structure. However, as I motivated before, the agents do not only consider this past information. Agents also consider future information, the expectation about the future. That is actually what drives the market, right? So basically, in this thesis, I developed these mixed causal, non-causal models that actually account for this past information, but also for future information. But what we saw in the literature is that somehow something was lacking. And that thing that was lacking is that the agents do not only consider the possible facts of the prices, but they also consider the uncertainty around those future prices. That is why we thought that it was ideal to capture that by considering the future shocks, the possible future shocks that we have. Actually considering that the prices of today, right, if they go up or if they go down, it is actually because the agents forecast some value, and the difference between that forecast reality and the actual reality make the prices move. That model is the mixed causal, non-causal, invertible, not invertible, that under our point of view, we are the first one to develop the theoretical analysis of this model. As I told you, this standard autoregressive model just depends on these past values. However, this mixed causal, non-causal model accounts for this past information, but also for future information. Actually, one characteristic of this model is that the roots of this characteristic polynomial are going to lie inside the unit circle, which actually is better to replicate these episodes when the price goes up very quick or goes down very quick. The new model that we are trying to come up is this MARMA model, which is the mixed autoregressive moving average model, invertible, not invertible, which is going to account for the past shocks, so the difference in the actual price and what it was forecast, but also the uncertainty about those future prices. Basically, we proceed with some ways to identify those models, and then we see that there is some financial relevant. This is very financial relevant because we see a lot these small episodes of short bubbles and, let's say, increases in the price motivated by unexpected information. But basically, we face several difficulties in this. The first is the process of identification, basically because the probability structure, the second order probability structure of these models is the same as the traditional autoregressive models. So it is impossible to identify using the traditional methods, just of the autocorrelation function or the spectrum in the frequency domain. So actually, we had to go to higher order moments, to higher order probability structures to identify those models. Then, of course, we also face some difficulties in the estimation. So what we know so far is that a traditional tool that the people estimate using maximum likelihood, of course, assuming a distribution function, but in this thesis, we propose a different method that is actually distribution-free, but can account for these higher order dependencies. So I'm going to talk about this second chapter that was recently published in the journal Econometrics Reviews, and it's called Spectral Estimation for Mixed Causal, Non-Causal Autoregressive Models. Basically, in this chapter, I proved that using the B spectrum, which is basically the third order spectral density, is a higher order spectral density, you can identify the mixed autoregressive models. We highlight that the skewness, only using the skewness of the process, we can make an identification and actually a consistent estimation. And then we make an empirical analysis in commodity prices. So the core problem here, when I began this research, is that, as I told you, that the second order moments cannot reveal whether the process have these roots inside the unit circle. So basically, we try to use these higher order statistics, the B spectrum, to identify, right? Then we propose an estimation function that was basically trying to minimize the distance between this B spectrum and the B periodogram, which is basically just a Fourier transformation of the data in the frequency domain. And in that way, we were capable to identify the models. Of course, we face several problems here, so we propose several meta-heuristic models to make the estimation. We actually propose a very beautiful theorem that actually proves that this B spectrum is actually unique for each type of process, and in this way we could identify. We saw that this non-causality was very related with commodity prices, because actually the link between the non-causality and the commodity prices is the convenience yield of these physical commodities. In this convenient yield, which is actually the benefit of having the physical commodity, the agents buy or sell the asset given the future expectations about the supply and the demand. Well, the conclusion of this paper is that the non-causality actually is observed in many of the commodity prices. Not only in the nickel, which is the example that I gave, but also in the cotton, the wheat, barley, zinc, copper, aluminum, and the Brent oil. In my third chapter, which is called Non-Causal and Non-Invertible ARMA Models, Identification, Estimation, and Application in Equity Portfolios, was recently published in the Journal of Time Series Analysis. I basically extended these mixed autoregressive models to the MARMA, that we call it MARMA because actually we include this invertible, not invertible part that account for these future shocks. Basically, we proved that if we ignore this type of probability structure, the consequence was that we actually induce some gauge-like or conditional volatility, which is actually doesn't exist, but is only inducing by the misspecification of the model. And then we do an empirical analysis in the FAMA French equity portfolios in the emerging markets. Basically, the idea is that if the true data generating process actually has non-invertible or non-causal effects, and you estimate it with the causal traditional models, then are going to fictitiously appear high-order correlations in the data. That will make the econometrician to use conditional volatility even when it's not needed. And actually, it has some bad impact, of course, in the risk measures and everything and that. The identification tool that we used here was the higher cumulants, but also we use some Portmanteau type of tests that were actually motivated by the models by Professor Jesiaka and Professor Gaviria with the GCOP model. Then we did an application in 24 emerging market portfolios, and basically what we see it was a very nice difference between the growth portfolios and the value portfolios. The growth portfolios had stocks that actually depend a lot on the future cash flows, for instance, technology sector, but also the value portfolios that is more traditional firms, for instance, the banks. Actually, in these growth portfolios, we saw a lot of future dependency, which is, of course, expected because these type of stocks depend a lot on the future free cash flows of the company. In the fourth chapter, which is called Explosive Episodes and Time Varying Volatility, a new Marma-Garch model applied to cryptocurrencies. This paper is forthcoming in Econometrics. We saw one pattern, and it was that actually we could find these non-invertible and non-causal probability structures, but even after that, we saw conditional volatility. So we saw that it was necessary to actually account for that and derive this new model that goes with the whole Marma plus a time-varying volatility that we call the Marma-Garch. So basically in this chapter, I extended the Marma and I accommodate this conditional volatility. Then I also found that using this type of model, we actually account better for this bubble-like behavior, and we could replicate better the volatility in this market. And then we also demonstrate some improvements over the standard Marma-Garch model in modeling or considering this future dependency. Why these cryptocurrencies have this, let's say, bubble-like behavior? Actually, because it is very unknown what are the fundamentals around the price of cryptocurrencies. However, the agents buy or sell expecting increase in the prices or decrease in the prices. We tried several approaches in the estimation of this model. We tried the quasi-maximum likelihood estimation by Professor Gaviria, but by Professor Sakoyan, but we also tried the Whittle estimation in the frequency domain. And yeah, of course, we found very interesting patterns. We applied this in the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, and other major cryptocurrencies. And of course, we found that the correct way to estimate it, improve it. In my last chapter, basically, I used this non-causal Garch 1-1 model that was basically considered the volatility as a pure future values. This chapter is not published, and we found pretty much the same, that the misspecification of the model can induce bias in the estimation. We applied this in some stocks from the United States, finding, of course, non-causality and non-invertibility. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for your presentation, Daniel. As expected, you took a little longer to talk, but we're used to that. The opposition will be opened by Professor Jaap Bos. He's a professor of banking and finance here at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, dear Daniel, so it's a pleasure to be here and to be part of your thesis committee. I enjoyed reading it a lot. And as you could probably already tell from my comments, it raised a lot of questions, but in a very positive way, because I could see many connections with, let's say, literature that I'm more familiar with. I'm not going to ask you about how you can use bubbles without having a model of fundamental prices. I'm not going to ask you about heterogeneous agent models and how they relate to your work, but I'm going to ask you something in that direction. So I was challenging you in my comments a little bit about the connection between, let's say, the empirical work that you do and the implications for theory. And I was suggesting that there is sort of a, in my view, ideally a sort of a loop. You know, empirical work inspires theory, maybe leads to change in theory, and vice versa. So I'm going to let you choose. So suppose that I take your results in, let's say, chapter 3, and I would challenge you a little bit to talk about the implications of what you do there and what you find for either finance theory or finance practice. So if I'm a theorist, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there is such a thing as nowadays as higher moment portfolio theory. Mandel and others have worked on that. is your work implying that I need to look into that further and develop that further? If I'm a practitioner and I want to know whether I'm generating alpha or loading up on risk premium and what's driving my results, what can I learn? So I'm very curious how you're going to make this translation from what you do in your thesis to what it would imply outside of the wonderful world that you created in your thesis. I look forward to your answer.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and your question. So basically, I will begin this discussion about the practitioner part. So basically, what we see in the market with what the people do is that they basically they have the price, right? The price is a non-stationary variable by definition. Then they do a transformation. They first try to look patterns in the mean, right? In the conditional mean, which is, of course, we assume that the price or the returns depends on past values or a moving average, for instance, probability structure, right? They try to fit that, and after that, they try to fit high-order correlations in the residuals of the first step, right? So then we come to the paper from Mandelbrot, that is basically saying that the returns, by definition, they have these high-order probability structures that usually are measured using the Garch-type models, right? So what I'm trying to say is that before you go there, use the MARMA. So try to see if that conditional mean actually has a probability structure that depends on the future, and try to account for that and compute the model again, and see if actually when you filter or when you include that future probability structure, see if your data still have these Garch type effects. Because actually, if that probability structure is filtered by the model, then you don't have to use the Garch model. And basically is saying that the high-order probability structure of your returns is quite different, meaning that, for instance, high volatility is not necessarily followed by high volatility, and small volatility is not necessarily followed by small volatility. That changes a lot. Also, the timing to enter or going out from the market itself, from that asset, but it's also changing the risk measures that you use it. For instance, the value at risk is totally dependent on that conditional volatility that you assume is there. Sometimes you just fit it. Sometimes you not even think that these returns has possibly this future type of a structure. So that changes a lot what the practitioners do, right? It's let's say it's just an extra step, but we actually proved that if we account for that, actually in these growth portfolios, when we filter for this MARMA model, and then we compute the residuals, after that there was no conditional volatility anymore. So actually this effect, or these common phrases that episodes of high volatility are followed by episodes by high volatility, and the other way around, possibly is not the case. Possibly the sources of volatility are just the unexpected information, but probably it doesn't last. Probably it's just a shock. And it's, of course, a shock from an unexpected information. We cannot account for that. Any model can account for that. But,
I think your opponent is already very happy with the answer. I would like to continue the opposition by Professor Jean-Michel Zakoyan he's a professor of finance from the Institute of Anti-Crest. I probably pronounce it wrongly, but the institute is very famous, so everybody knows who it is. Professor Zakoyan.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I also very much enjoyed reading your thesis, even if I'm biased concerning non-causal models, but I really liked your dissertation. I have a question about the selection procedure that you propose concerning the different autoregressive representations. When you have a non-causal model, you have, as you explained, several representations which are compatible, but only one with ID errors. And so you propose a test of IDness based on a recent paper by Philips Geratis. I was just wondering, in their test, it's a portmanteau type test, so they apply it directly to the data. In your case, you have an estimation step. So have you tried to see if there is an effect of this estimation on the test itself? Maybe on the asymptotic distribution, because we know that for standard test, the test is not the same. For example, in ARMA models, you have a different distribution when you apply it to residuals. So, did you see the same effect on your models?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your comments and thank you for your question. Yes, regarding the selection procedure, what we try to do is begin with the second order estimation, which is, let's say, something that we in the community have accepted, and it's actually the first procedure that, for instance, is proposed also in your papers, but also in the recent papers from Professor Jesiak and Gorriabou. So we begin with the second order estimation, and then we try to, let's say, graph these coefficients. And after that, what we try to do is to accommodate all of that roots that come up from that estimation, assuming probably non-causality or non-invertibility, right? So this is what we do in the first step. Actually, when we estimate that all of those models, we go for a second step that is the one that we are doing in the frequency domain, minimizing the difference between the spectrum and the B-periodogram, but also the B spectrum and the B-periodogram, which is the higher order correlation that we consider, which is very much inspired by the G-COB estimator, but in the time domain. Regarding this paper from Professor Hirtraris that we are using those tests, that test is somehow inspired by the type of Portmanteau test. So basically we have the second order correlation, which is pretty much the autoregressive, the autocorrelation function part, plus the third order correlation. Regarding the asymptotic distribution of that test, basically we saw that it was a chi-square distribution with 2 degrees of freedom. We have to actually work more in that, because it's the same story as, for instance, with the G-COB. It is still unknown how far we can go to actually detect this IIDness. If we need to go for the third order correlation or the fourth order correlation, it is actually unknown so far in the literature what is, let's say, optimal, because we know that if we go further, actually we lose efficiency. So it is somehow unknown how many moments do we need to include to actually make sure or discard this null hypothesis that the data is IID. So far, what we did in all of applications is take the model that exhibits less high order correlation. This is somehow what we did in the 4 chapters.
You're happy? Yes. Okay, then the opposition will be continued by Professor Tomás del Barrio Castro. He's a professor of econometrics at the University de les Îles Baleares. That's French for Spanish Islands, I guess, but Catalan. Okay, please, Professor, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed the presentation. I also have a pleasure to read the PhD, the thesis, and it's really nice. I learned a lot, and I enjoyed that. So thank you for considering me for being part of this committee. So I have just one question. It's related to your second chapter is basically example 2, right? In example 2, you have a MARMA 1-1, then you propose to fit the ER2, the all-pass ER2, take the roots or the inverted roots and distribute it there, right? I think I must miss something because you claim that you could have complex root, but in this case I don't think so. You should have complex root, the process should be complex value, not real value. But this, I'm not sure if I'm not right, but this is a minor thing, right? Other thing is related with, if you have complex root, you should have a spectrum with a peaking harmonic frequency. Otherwise, you don't have complex root, right? So maybe it's a first step that you could do to check if you have complex root or not. Even that the spectrum is only second order and your approach is more general, but you could get information about that, I think so. Okay, thank you.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your nice comments and your question. Indeed, that is actually what we see in these, I guess, equations 15 and 16 from the second chapter. We actually allow this MAR11 to have the real part of the coefficient, but also the imaginary part of the coefficient. Darius was basically motivated by a recent paper that we were developing with Arthur Thomas in his visit here in Maastricht University. And it was that we doing some simulation and playing with these proofs, but also with the data, we found that we could somehow, using this MAR11 with complex roots, we could actually fit somehow a long memory process. We began to do the mathematical proofs, but actually we stopped somehow developing them. But you are right in the sense that if we work with the complex root, actually we will have a complex value. So we will have a complex variable, which has a real part, but also the imaginary part. What we actually investigated only was the real part. So actually at this point, the imaginary part is somehow discarded, as you, for instance, discarded when you are doing the inverse Fourier transform. If you have, for instance, your data and you do the Fourier transform, after you have it in the frequency domain, if you wanted to have it back in the time domain, actually the data also splits in two, in the real part and in the imaginary part. Somehow for us, it is still unknown if we can use the imaginary part for identification purposes or for estimation purposes. There is somehow an unknown for that. There is still a work in progress about that. But I wanted to actually split those coefficients in the imaginary and the real part because it was an stylized fact that we observed on the data itself. However, of course, with your comment, we can still dig into that idea and possibly find, let's say, if that imaginary information is somehow useful for identification or estimation purposes. So far, what we can see is again that this MAR11 with complex coefficients, not roots, with complex coefficients can mimic this ARFIMA process, this fractional integrated process, but of course we need to prove it, and not only with the data, but also theoretically. Yep.
Okay, thank you. The opposition will be continued by Nalan Basturk, Dr. Nalan Basturk, and she's an associate professor of econometrics here at Maastricht University.
Yes, thank you. I would like to also congratulate you, Danielle, for your thesis that has application and theoretical contributions. So it's a challenge to do both at the same time in the thesis. I'm also happy to be part of the committee. My questions are going to be about your volatility models. You can expect that, I think. So we have done it. Many people have these wonderful, complex volatility models, yours as well. And but then we face the criticism, oh, you're doing this super complex model, but Garch-11 beats all. So why are you even bothered with these extensions and really difficult models to estimate? And I've done it myself too, so I'm not blaming you for this, but I would like your defense for this criticism. When we go that road, they also are right that GARCH 1.1 not only beats all of the other models, but it's also really easily extendable to multivariate cases. So as a portfolio manager, I'm not really interested in one stock's volatility, but I want to see my diversification. I have many stocks that have possibly common features. So how would you react to this criticism that you're coming with a too complex model to generalize to multivariate cases?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your comments and your question. I agree. I actually agree that in the 99% of the cases, the GARCH 1.1 beats all of the models, basically because it's very parsimonious. The asymptotic distribution is actually very easily to derive. Estimating it actually is very nice. However, the GARCH 1.1 lacks of several things. The first thing is that it doesn't replicate the observed, for instance, leverage effect, which is very important. Actually, the GARCH 1.1 assumes that the effects of positive news is the same as negative news, which is actually not true. We actually see in the daily prices that actually positive news do not affect at all the volatility. Positive news is pretty much the same as no news. However, negative news provoke a lot of sellings, increasing a lot the volatility. So that is the first part. My model somehow is inspired by the GARCH 1.1, but in a reversal way. When we do the reversal way, actually we found that when the true data generating process is this somehow more complicated GARCH, actually what happens is that if we use the traditional GARCH 1.1 model to estimate it, we underestimate the effect of the news, and then we inflate the clustering effect. Let's say the repercussions of that are mostly modeling the extreme values. For instance, you have a distribution which could be less leptocurtic than it must be. So as you are underestimating the effect of the news, of course, the risk measures that you calculate based on that wrong volatility actually misestimate this possible effect. So somehow, when you compute the risk, the value at risk, or the expected shortfall, you're going to end up, of course, with less magnitude, which of course expose you more to events of extreme losses. So that is basically what I'm proposed in this paper. And I also found that, of course, the stationary conditions are a little bit different, but not that much. So actually we can still use, for instance, the same inverse Jacobian for the covariance matrix, for instance. So it's not that different, but this is the main, let's say, effect: the underestimation of the news and the inflation of the clustering effect. So what we are proposing is to estimate it. Try to estimate it in the way that we are proposing, then go with the higher order information criteria and try to get the model that, let's say, minimize the distance between that conditional volatility using the two traditional models, the GARCH 1.1 and the one that we are proposing. So that is...
Okay, can you extend your models to multivariate cases?
Come again?
Can you extend your models to multivariate applications?
Yes. Indeed. That is actually a work in progress that we are doing, that of course we can do this type of Beck or DCC multivariate GARCH models, of course, to account for these common dynamics that we really see in the market, this common volatility, which is actually not only shared in a particular segment of the market, but the market as a whole.
Happy, Nalan? Okay, then the opposition will be continued by Professor Joanne Jasiak. She's a professor of economics in York University, Canada.
Thank you. Daniele, congratulations on your innovative work. I enjoyed a lot reading your thesis. Your bispectral estimator resembles in many aspects the generalized method of moments, GMM estimator. Could you please tell us more about this comparison? Comment on the properties of your estimator compared to GMM, and emphasize the role of weights in achieving the asymptotic efficiency.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your nice comments and your question. Indeed, this bispectral estimation is just the frequency domain partner of this method of moments. Somehow, using this bispectral estimation, we wanted to first get rid of the time. So first, that was our main motivation for using it. The asymptotic distribution, let's say, of this bispectral estimation follows for each segment that you take, just a normal. However, when you zoom them out, it's a chi-square distribution for do traditional inference. The point that you mentioned about the weights is very important because theoretically must exist a combination of all of these moments that produce, let's say, the best efficiency, right? Somehow, in these applications, we were not too much interested in this efficiency, but our main concern was about identification. So what we did was actually proving that using this B spectrum, you could correctly identify the process, because the high order correlation structure, the high order probability structure is unique. That proof is condensed in the Theorem 1 of Chapter 2. However, in our future works, also following recent papers, for instance, by Velasquez, we are going to try to actually find a more efficient estimation. Let's say that the question is what we face also in your recent papers. How far we need to go? How far we need to go? Because we see that if we include more moments, actually we can identify better, but we also lose efficiency, right? So it is like a trade-off between this identification and also the computation that you need to reach the true data generating process to find the correct model. And the more moments that you add, you lose more, because of course you rely in more assumptions about the error term that it is of course unknown by definition. So that is why we also try to only use the B spectral density, because with the B spectral density we only assume that the data has skewness. So even though in absence of leptokurticity, even when the kurtosis is 3, we can identify the process. So that was some kind of advantage for us. That, for instance, different from Velasquez and Lovato, that they use the second and the fourth order moment, we use the third order moment. And actually we proved that only using that you can recover the true model. Yeah.
Okay, if you're happy, I'm happy.
I'm happy.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Stefan Straatmans, Professor of Finance here in Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, dear Daniel, first of all, I want to join my predecessors here in congratulating you with this impressive piece of work, where you tailor both quality and quantity. And then I really refer to the number of derivations and chapters that you have. And I was also happy to see that you incorporated a lot of finance applications, and that might be a positive externality of you teaching the finance course. But you can maybe talk about that with us, with Jaap and with me later on. Now, my first question relates to how you evaluate the performance of your models in all the different chapters. And of course, the question then arises, performance of what? You also mentioned already a lot in the presentation the fit of the models, but the fit by definition is in sample. But of course, practitioners care about forecasting performance, especially if you want to apply this in the finance industry. So your thoughts on that, please.
Yes, basically we know just by definition the prices react to the unexpected information, right? So somehow we can forecast, or let's say just try to figure out the probability structure of the future, even though we don't know it, but it comes in a certain way. It comes in a certain way. That is what we do in the in-sample fitting. There are several works, for instance, a recent paper by Professor Jesiak and Goriru, that basically using this high-order probability structure, you can figure out, let's say, somehow like a Brownian motion, an estimation of inspired of the Brownian motion, of course, not doing point forecast, but interval forecast. So actually, when you account for this high-order probability structure that can actually replicate the expectations, you have some gains, but not in point forecast. Not in point forecast, in interval forecast. So actually, the results, what we have is that we estimate better the uncertainty, right? The uncertainty. That uncertainty, of course, is not going to do like a better prediction of the price. Of course, no, Stefan, but it will actually improve the risk measures associated with that forecast. So using these expectations, you can incorporate that, for instance, in the value at risk and the expected shortfall, and you get better protected for that unexpected information, right? So this is so far what we did in this paper, in this thesis. We were by trying to fill a gap more about the identification, trying to build like a robust theory about identification. But of course, this idea of incorporating this uncertainty in the risk measures, of course, trying to forecast these high-order probability structures is something that I need to work in and develop further. Of course, trying to fill this gap that we also see with the practitioners in finance, mostly in these markets that are quite sensible to the future cash flows. For instance, we see the case of what is happening now with the technology sector in America, that actually any move that comes from the geopolitical events or the monetary policy that is more hawkish than we thought, actually is causing these massive effects. My point in the thesis is just using the traditional models, we cannot account for that. If we use this other technology, probably we get better, but we are still unprotected about this unexpected information. But this is somehow like a motivation of what we, or the following steps in this forecasting with these type of models.
So, but you would expect that if you would apply this, for example, or if you would apply a conditional VAR backtest, for example, as people typically do in risk management, that you get better results with your technique if you estimate your risk measure using your non-causal component in it.
Yes, indeed, indeed. I expect better results, but I also have better results. That is actually a work in progress that I'm working now that possibly I will present very soon here at the university. I actually improve the traditional expected shortfall, not only because I get a more leptocurtic approach in the tail, but also because doing this right Garch model, I do not underestimate the effect of the news. So I gain because of the quantile of the distribution, but I also gain because I let's say, have a better volatility, conditional volatility forecasting. So I try to enter into this debate about using the bar of the expected shortfall. That, of course, you need the one for the other. But with this approach, I have some gains, not only in the back testing, but also in the stress testing.
Okay, thank you for your answer on the question of Stefan Straatmans. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Julien Ambekkers, and he's an associate professor of finance at the University of Liège.
Thank you, Daniel, for this very interesting presentation and for your very good work. So my question is going to join a bit some of the comments made by my colleagues more oriented towards the finance topics. So my question is related to chapter 4. In your application, you study cryptocurrencies. And there you took the stance somehow to first detrend the data, and then you work with the residuals of this detrended process. You fit your Marma-Garch model. But then my question is, why do you decide directly to go for detrending the data, knowing that in finance you would be interested in returns or log returns, mostly mean forecast, volatility, covariance of these returns? So how could you somehow exploit what you did here in something like a portfolio allocation exercise? So that's my first question. And my second question is related to the estimation of the Marma part of the model. So you said that you use for the selection of the Marma part of the model. So you said that you use a portmanteau type test for IID data, and you try to minimize some squared error, some autocorrelation function of the squared error. But somehow the Garch part is actually implying that you would have some autocorrelation in the squared residuals. So how do you reconcile these different issues?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your comments and your question. Yes, indeed, in chapter 4, what we did is to trend the data and work with that cyclical component. Somehow the log returns are quite accepted in the financial theory. Actually, we work with returns every day, but it is also a very strong transformation. Actually, many people criticize the returns because, for instance, first, they kill any type of course, trend that you see in the data, right? Even though in these new, for instance, methods in artificial intelligence and machine learning and everything, they even do not any transformation in the data. They try to work with the trend. So basically what we see is that if we want to account for this non-causality or this non-invertibility, actually using the log returns kills every type of pattern or bubble-like behavior that you see in the data. Basically because, of course, you do the log transformation and you also see that those returns, of course, are mean reverting. And of course, given the law of the one price, the mean is very close to zero. So you have actually no dynamics. If the market is very efficient, for instance, in the applications that I did in Bitcoin, which is a massive market cap, or the growth stocks that, for instance, move a lot of money and information, of course, the mean of those returns must be zero, so you have no dynamics. So that is my first thing. I use the traditional Hodgkin-Prescott method, but I also proposed another method based on the Fourier transform. So basically what I do is that I just have the raw data. I do the Fourier transform, and then I kill the high order harmonics, from the Fourier transform, and then I only have the rapid effect. That rapid effect, of course, mimics somehow better this explosive behavior that we see, and also give us some information to reproduce this bubble-like, this local explosive behavior that we see in prices. So this is what we do in the first part. In the second question that you make to me about these MAR models and the Portmanteau test is basically we fit the Marma, right? We try to we fit the Marma. And then we also, with those residuals, we fit the Garch. Then we compute the conditional volatility. And then we have the standardized residuals. After we have those standardized residuals, we pass it through the filter of the Portmanteau test to see if we still have dynamics. So the idea is to see the second order dynamics, but also the higher order dynamics in the type of the expected value of the residual squares. So if we, let's say, don't see dynamics, we only reach that point, probably there can exist higher order dynamics, but so far that is what we did. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like you're happy with your answer, Julien. Time flies. That means the last opponent of the degree committee will now ask his question, and that is Dr. Tobias Hartl, Assistant Professor of Econometrics here in Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, Daniel, thank you for your very nice thesis. I really enjoyed reading it. And I have a couple of, well, mostly I enjoyed reading it because it made me think about my own research and how your non-causal models relate to what I'm working on. So it's good that you're staying at Maastricht University and I can bore you with my further questions after your defense. My main question today is about your chapter 2, mainly the estimation of your non-causal or mixed causal autoregressive models. So what you do is you first estimate the invertible AR model, or the causal AR model, and then you map those coefficients to the non-causal models. And in doing so, you try to avoid falling into a local minimum, which you, as you told us today, which is one of the potential pitfalls of optimization. Now I'm puzzled, if you increase the dimension of your autoregressive process, so if you add further autoregressive lags, does your optimization problem still remain feasible from a computational perspective, not only in terms of computational speed, but also in terms of whether you can identify the true optimum, or whether, or when does your estimation procedure run into trouble in terms of optimization?
Hi, esteemed opponent. Thank you for your comments and your question. Yes, the question is that, of course, it gets more complicated. We have a very powerful and very beautiful theorem that actually shows that the estimation function reaches its global minimum, right? Its global minimum under the true specification and the true parameters. So we have some theoretical background to reach that minimum. Empirically, of course, is tricky. You have this problem of local minima because each possible representation with the equivalence in terms of the coefficient to the true process is going to reach a minimum. So actually, you get the complications actually grow exponentially because it's adding one plane to the vector of parameters. So each parameter that you actually include is transformation when you go for R2 to R3 to R4, even to Rn. Or let's say your paper proposes that even if you go to Rn, you can identify theoretically. Of course, that was some comments that we had also in the papers for one of the referees. But the idea is that we can.
You may finish your answer, Daniel.
Okay, so that is basically some complications that we can have, but with these meta-heuristic procedures, for instance, the simulated annealing and all of that, we can actually reach that global minimum, even though, as you clearly said, it gets more complicated when you are more parameters.
Okay, thank you very much. Daniel Velasquez Gaviria, the degree committee here present, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense, and I request that you and your company await the result of our deliberations and our return to this room. Please stand.
No, because the certificate, I don't know when they give me.
When they enter, but when they enter, we have to stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Yes.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Hit the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
We kunnen op plaats nemen.
Daniel Velasquez Gaviria. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense, and in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Heck is authorized to confer upon this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Wilt u gaan staan?
You see why we need paradigm? Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Daniel Velasquez Gaviria, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Dear Daniel, dear Dr. Velasquez Gaviria, I'm very happy and proud to be the first one to officially congratulate you on your accomplishment. What a journey. Indeed, to be honest, I have to remind you that I didn't choose you to work with me. You have been selected actually by Professor Dries Vermeulen, who is here, and Professor Anton Pelzer, who went to the job market to select PhD candidates for the department. They were very enthusiastic about your motivation, your maturity, and your skills. They made you an offer that I'm happy that you have accepted. Well, the problems started, however. First, believe it or not, I'm talking to my colleague here, but SBE didn't recognize your 2 years master from Columbia as being a 120 ECTS program. After some tedious computations on equivalences, you had to take 2 extra courses from the department. Secondly, after being hired, the COVID hits us and you were stuck in Columbia for months. You had to give your first courses, QM3, online, without the knowledge of the PBL system that we have here in Maastricht. Finally, after having selected you, no one knew what to do with you. I've been asked to supervise you as you were interested in applied econometrics with applications to finance. Indeed, when you started, you had already some expertise in teaching finance in Columbia, and you had already at that time published 6 papers. You like finance and financial econometrics. This explains why Professor Kubada and we have composed this jury with so many experts in financial econometrics. I would like to thank Professor Jaap Bos and Professor Stratman from the Department of Finance, Professor Zakoyan from the CREST, Jean-Michel has also hosted Daniel in Paris for several months. Nalan Basturk, who teaches finance at our department. Dr. Julien Buckers from the Department of Finance of HEC Liège. You see a lot of people in finance. I also would like to thank Professor Jaziak, who comes for this occasion from Canada. She didn't sleep a lot. She told me she arrived just now. She's not only an expert in non-causal models, together with Jean-Michel Zakoyan, but she has also written several important books and papers in financial econometrics. I would like to thank Professor Barrio del Castro, who had decided himself at a conference a few years ago that he wanted to be part of Daniel's committee. And I would like to thank Tobias Sartel and, of course, Gianluca, who has co-supervised this thesis. To come back to Daniel, our relationship at the beginning was not as smooth as it is now, or the one we can imagine. I told you already that I didn't choose Daniel, right? Indeed, you had already published some papers, and it took us some time to find and to develop a common topic, a common area, because you wanted to bring, and it is normal, the expertise that you had gained before in your previous work in Columbia. But once we have started this project on spectral estimation of non-causal model, you put all your energy on it. Out of the 4 chapters of your thesis, 3, as you have shown today, 3 have already been published. You have also not published, but you have also worked on new projects, and you commented to Stefan Stratman on using the new papers that you have in the pipeline. So a second point, the first one was that we had to take some time to find common work. The second point that annoyed me at the beginning, of course when we don't know you, is a part of your personality, namely that you are kind of a bit of a fashion victim. And I mean, you still are, but I'm getting used to it, I think, at the moment. Third, and several people notice it, when you started here, you called yourself an assistant professor, because in Columbia, you were the assistant of a professor, right? That means I'm an assistant professor, and Ines, Wilms, and myself, we had a hard time to explain to you the subtlety of having a thesis and so on. Anyway, but you adapted very quickly, not only in terms of research, but also for teaching. Your evaluations as a tutor were excellent, and I was amazed to see that all students know you and talk to you in the corridor. You also know many people from admin that I don't even know after 30 years. But again, I'm not an example, but still. Your PhD contract ended in August, and you have started with us a lecturer position at CAI. You gave several courses with great evaluations. You teach not only finance, but mathematics and statistics 1 and 2. You give the tutorial meetings for Nalan in financial econometrics, and you have excellent evaluation in courses that have a reputation to be very difficult, like MNS 1, mathematical and statistics 1. So when you look at your evaluation for that course, they are even better than those of your predecessor, Dirk Templar, with some respect. But as I heard from the prorector today, Stan Van Ussel, Dirk is the second worst teacher after Stan himself. Though I don't know whether it's a good starting point, but you have a great evaluation. To supervise students is easy with you. You patiently explain to students what we expect from them. You follow them from the beginning on a day-to-day basis. You fail once, by the way, to teach in a careful way something, and this time you failed was with me. You tried to explain to me many times how the cryptocurrency market works. how to, what the blockchain is, what are the platforms to sell and to buy, but I still didn't get the point. So you see, you are not such a maybe good, you have some improvement as a lecturer in front of difficult people. Finally, I would like to put forward your maturity. You have an easy contact with people, students, and that has been very important, for instance, to save our life at Francesco's party, when you had to deal with the owner of the restaurants that wanted to kick us out with hands. And in that occasion, you were able to deal and to negotiate with the owners to stay alive, at least to leave Francesco alive. We also had a good time during this period at conferences, but also with when we had some visitors or PhD students, Francesco behind me, but also Arthur, Alil, and Ariane who visited us to work on common topics. I do not know what your future will be, whether you are willing to stay around or not. But contrarily to what Trump said to Zelensky, you have all the cards in your hands. I wish you all the best. My final thoughts go to your wife, Alicia, who has supported you these 4 years of constraints and hard work. But actually, from the pictures you sent me with Alicia and your dog, Signorina, you also had good time, I think. So, congratulations to all of you, and to quote our prorector, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Heck. Dear Dr. Velasquez Gaviria, Dr. Daniel, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree that you have acquired. The remainder of this meeting will be as follows. Some of us will stay here, and the others can have a beer already. And those who are staying here are the degree committee, Daniel, your paranymphs, and your wife for some pictures. And the rest may leave now as you like. To the rafter, yeah. Wherever that is.